And that was the means in which we were taught at that point.
Okay, so that brings me to my next question. This communication had to get better in order for you to understand more. So what you did is you actually took on the task of learning the language.
Yes, absolutely.
So at what point did you become fluent?
Well, I would say within the first year to a year and a half, I spoke quite a bit of Japanese in Okinawan. More than enough to order food, ask directions, give directions, buy things, all of the customary greetings, of course. And like every other GI, when you first got over there, you asked the various ladies at the different bars that you would frequent or wherever. You would ask them how to say good morning, how to say hi, how to say love, you know, the normal stuff like this. And then, of course, in the studio itself, I never got to a point where I could say, okay, this is the colon, or this is the liver, or something like that. However, we could always say, this is where the area that you would hit. Is this the area that you hit? What does it do? And that sort of thing. So I would say about a year to a year and a half, I spoke quite a bit of Okinawan Japanese.
Okay, but that brings me back to another point. You were also, almost on a daily basis, not only
Absolutely.
studying karate, but also spending time with Sensei Kesey. So it became more than a karate relationship.
Yeah, that is true. The other Okinawans and most of the GIs used to refer to me as Little Kesey, because I actually mimicked his every mannerism, every move, everything. Because 90% of the time, when you saw Sensei Kesey, you saw me. We worked together during the day. We would pick up our assignments. We would literally rush through the assignments so that we could go to the fields and train and practice karate during the day. At the end of the day, I would eat at the chow hall and mess hall, catch a bus, go to the studio in Old Koza, and literally work out until late that night. It even got sometimes to the point where I would spend the night in the dojo itself. We would party together, we would drink together, we would go to bars together, we would work together, and we would train together. And this was a 7-day a week process.
Okay, now let's talk a little bit about Sensei Kesey. He's your first and only karate instructor at this point. Who were some of the people that he trained with? What was his rank? And how did you get involved with his karate?
All right. Sensei Kesey was a 4th degree, a Yondan, black belt. At that time, he was studying under my Shiro, who was also his neighbor, had the adjoining house, which literally was less than a foot away. I mean, you could open the dojo window and literally climb out of the window into my Shiro's house. My Shiro was the district All Japan Karate Do League head, for what better term, because during that time frame, the largest Okinawan Karate Association, as far as I know, the basic only association that was recognized on Okinawa in Japan was, in fact, the All Japan Karate Do League. At that time, Nakamura Sensei, which happened to be Okinawan Kempo, which was the largest group of karate people on the island at that time, he was the main man. After that came Zenro Shimabuku. He was Okinawan Shorinryu. All right, Mashido also was Shorinryu. Now, Sensei Kesey was studying at that time directly under Mashido, because, which you'll also see in the photographs, which Mashido would be sitting, Sensei Kesey would be standing or kneeling. It was Sensei Kesey's class, however, it was overseen by Mashido. So Mashido would teach the classes from time to time. Sensei Kesey would teach the classes every day, would be there every day for the classes itself.
Okay, now at this point, you had not encountered or known about Hoen Soken, Sensei Hoen Soken.
No.
At what point, now I know we're jumping around a little bit because I do want to talk to you a little bit about your training and how you got promoted to the different levels. but I just want to make sure at this point you were not aware of any training going on with Sensei Kesey and Sensei Sokka at this point in your being there in Okinawa.
No. It wasn't until after I achieved Shodan ranking, which was 1961, that I became aware of Grandmaster Sokka. Prior to that, I had never seen Sensei Sokka. My involvement was continuously with Nakamura, Shimobuku. We would train. Every month there was a shiai at one of the Jaeger cons and movie houses, or one of the opposing dojos from a different system. Sensei Kesey made it a point that once or twice a month we would go to a different style of karate and watch. We would simply pay respects, enter the dojo, kneel, and stay there the entire class, never saying a word. At the end of the class, Sensei Kesey and I would stand up, we would bow, pay respects to the instructor, and leave. Once we were out of earsight of the school itself that we had just witnessed or watched the classes, Sensei Kesey would stop me and turn and say, all right, what did you see that was their weak parts? What did you see were their strong parts? And he always made me pay attention to the strong, because he used to say, one day you're going to end up fighting one of these people. The more you know about your opponents, the easier it is going to be able to win. In fact, sometimes when we would see a technique that was exceptionally good or something, it wouldn't be but a week later before Sensei was teaching it to us. But the manner in which he would teach it would be converted into the Shorin-ryu manner in doing it. So Sensei Kesey was very much up for anything that was good. Sensei Kesey, I found out, had a incredible reputation as being a very, very aggressive fighter. People used to challenge him all the time. I have been at least 2 to 3 times that I can remember people coming to the dojo while classes were going on and come in and issue a challenge to Sensei Kesey. Sensei Kesey would simply bow the class out, send us all outside, all of us. When I say all of us, maybe a large class would have consisted of 8 to 10 people at the most. Most of the time it was 5, 6, and 7 people. So it was a very, almost like a very intense semi-private lesson. In any case, he would send us outside of the dojo. Then he would close the doors, close the windows, and he would literally beat on this man and beat him unconscious. When that happened, he would simply come out, open the doors, walk out, and go around the dojo to the back into his house, and he would disappear for 30 minutes to an hour, calm down. We in turn would simply go in, drag the person out of the dojo, throw him in the street or in the side of the street, and go back in to work out. And that was just sort of an accepted thing.
So we're learning a little bit about Sensei Kesey, a little bit about your background, your training. What I'd like to do now is just hop ahead. This is your first trip, your first visit to Grandmaster Sokka's house. Could you just give us a feeling for the type of setting, maybe the type of house that he lived in, and what you encountered on your very first visit?
Well, Sensei Sokka was a very unique man. The more I had come in contact and the more I had found out about him, I found out that he was truly a teacher of teachers. And if you would, picture a man that is small in stature, maybe 120 pounds at most, white hair, seemed to be a very gentle man. To me, he looked like a papa-san. All right, did not look like any grandmaster in karate, someone that you would fear. Sensei Kesey took me to his home, in which he had a very small dojo, and this dojo would have been maybe 7 foot square, 7 by 8, something like this, but he had a large mud courtyard, and this is basically where we trained right there. Now, Sensei Sokka, upon meeting him, could not speak one word of English, could not speak a word of English. And even though he spoke fluid Japanese, fluid Okinawan, and fluid Spanish, English was not his forte at all. He could not read, write, sing, dance, speak English at all. So therefore, everything was done through Sensei Kesey telling me, him telling him, etc., etc. The house that Sensei Soken lived in looked like any traditional Okinawan house, close to other houses. Did not have matching wood. The dojo floors were a composite of wood planks or wood flooring to make the flooring itself. That was about it when we first met.
Now, it was sort of like a private lesson that you took there. Could you give us an idea of who might be attending these private lessons and what type of instruction might have been given?
Mm-hmm. All right, well, Sensei Soken was a very selective individual to start with, and apparently did not accept any students. And the only reason that I was accepted was that I was Sensei Kesey's #1 man. I was the top winner during my time on Okinawa. I was a showpiece for him. Sensei Kesey used to take me to Nakamura's house up in Nago, the northern end of the island. He used to take me to Shimabuku's house. He used to take me to the various styles of karate and literally show me off. He would go in, I would be kneeling outside, they would sit down, have tea, he would come out and say, get up and do kata so-and-so, do weapon so-and-so. They would bring out somebody, I would have to spar him or what have you like this. And that is really the reason why Sensei Kesey took me to Sensei Soken's. Now, basically, I was the one that opened the doors for any Americans because there were no American students of Sensei Soken's. I was the first. So I guess by me sort of breaking ground, it led into everybody else that has been lucky and fortunate enough to study under this great individual. Sensei Soken's class, basically, as far as my training went, I would say about 80 to 90% of it was weapons training. Sensei Soken was a master in the weapons. He was just incredible, just incredible. He would train me in kata. Other times we would come over, and I'm talking about sometimes twice a week, sometimes twice a month, sometimes just weekly. Like that we would train. It wasn't every day. It was every day with Sensei Kesey. Kesey was my main instructor. Sensei Soken became my grandmaster. All right. The training itself would vary from kata to weapons to body change to some basic fighting drills. I would go to the class only with Kesey. I never was allowed to go by myself. Kesey was always there. Sometimes Kesey would take one or two other individuals from our dojo with us if they were exceptional or were getting up in rank or what have you. Kesey did not expose everybody to Sensei Soken. I was, as far as I know, the only one that was afforded that gift. When we would go, there would be sometimes some of Soken's belts there. And when I say belts, I mean students. You would walk in and you would see 3 or 4 Okinawans, maybe 5 at top, working out in the courtyard. They all wore white belts or black belts. Sensei Soken did not have a ranking system per se, because we used to fight some of his people. And I would look at him and say, well, this guy's wearing a white belt, this guy's going to be a piece of cake. Well, that guy could have been a white belt for years upon years upon years. And so you didn't know what you were getting into. But Sensei Soken had either a white belt or a black belt. Sensei Soken at the time wore a black belt. He did not wear a red belt. And I've never seen Sensei Soken fly colors. Colors being that he had school patches or emblems of any type. He always wore a plain white karate uniform. And back then, speaking of karate uniforms, the first karate uniforms were almost a yellow trill. It was like a light canvas or something. There was no bleach white karate uniforms. They became bleach white through constant wear and constant washing. So everybody had, you could literally tell just about the experience of an individual depending on the whiteness of the uniform that he wore itself. So we would go, we would train, weapons kata most of the time, regular kata, another large percentage of the time, and then from time to time we would go into technique. Most of the karate body change and such like this, Sensei Kesey taught me through Sensei Sokka. Sensei Sokka did not directly teach me any of the body change other than 1 or 2 times that I can remember working a few techniques with him and him correcting. Otherwise it was Sensei Kesey would do it, then I would punch Sensei Kesey, or Sensei Kesey would punch me. I would do the execution of the technique, or vice versa, and Sokka would interject a correction. 99.999% of the time directing all of his comments to Sensei Kesey, and then Kesey interpreting to me as best he could at that point.
Now, was there ever a point, Sensei, when you were able to communicate with Sensei Grandmaster Sokka so that you could talk to him in Japanese or in the Okinawan language?
Yes, there was, but here again it was very small, very limited. Once again, I did not speak enough Japanese to ask any technical questions or anything like this. It's funny because every time I would greet Sensei Sokka, and I would say Unjo Ganju Yamisei, which is a very, very illustrious greeting for a Grandmaster. It means most honorable. I'm in your debt to be here, and very, very, very extremely respectful statement. And of course he would get this horrendous smile on his face, and he'd give me a quaint little nod of the head, you know, and then he would come back with a sentence that was about that long, and I would catch bits and pieces of it. So as far as how are you today, Sensei? Are you hungry? Would you like some tea? Would you like something to eat? What katas? This sort of thing. We could converse that way. Could we sit down and read a newspaper to him? No, I couldn't.
Now, Sensei, I want to ask you some questions because at this point your training is now taken on a whole new level. One of the things that a lot of people don't know, and I mean a lot of people unless they are very close to you, Sensei Sokka had several katas that he taught you on a regular basis. Could you just refer to some of them and explain how that came about?
Yes, from what I understand, Sensei Sokka being a Grandmaster, once you reach a Grandmaster level, you can change kata to what suits you, being such that kata should never change and basically never does change. However, there was versions, what we considered to be Sokka's versions of a certain kata. In other words, I was studying Shorin-ryu karate at the time, and let's take Pasai Sho. Even today, I teach Shorinryu Pasai Sho. I teach Sokka's personal Pasai Sho, and I teach Sokka Matsumoto Pasai Sho. So we have basically 3 Pasai Shos. There's several katas that we have that what we term the name is Sokka kata. And that's specifically because this is the way that Sensei Sokka did it privately himself. And then he would say, this is the Matsumoto version, but this is my kata. So we would have Pasai Sho, and then we would have Pasai Dai, you know, in katas as such. And there's a few katas that we have that are private from Sokka alone that I don't think anybody else has at all, other than the people that studied at our dojo, being Sensei Kesey's dojo. Of course, we would teach them there. So what we would do is we would basically train from Sensei Sokka and perfect in Kesey Dojo. That's where we did all of our training.
Now, there are a lot of video Super 8 pictures of Grandmaster Sokka. And some of these katas that he performs or techniques, by looking at them, you can see that the blocks may not be perfect or there may be a slight stumble. Could you explain why people shouldn't be looking at those and viewing the kata that way?
Yeah, it's amazing. I have seen people do kata and look exactly like Sensei Sokka. And when I say exactly, I mean exactly. If Sensei Sokka stumbled, they stumbled. If they did a half block, if he did a half block, they did a half block, etc. The problem is that Sensei Sokka was in his 70s and 80s. So therefore, he could not, let's say as an example in Pasai Show, when you execute your block and then you take your right foot and you slap the blocking hand, the left hand. Well, Sensei Soken couldn't get his foot up that high anymore. So when he did it, he came around with his hand, with his leg low. A lot of his punches, a lot of the blocks and stuff like this, he would say this is the punch, and then when you did it, he would correct it. If you did it identical to Sensei Soken, he would come over and correct it to its proper manner. Okay? Being such that he was 70 and 80 some years old. So he's not going to have the snap, the strength, the speed, the agility that he had when he was 40. So it amazes me. I still from time to time, people send me films. They call me, I see their kata or whatever, and I'm just amazed that they haven't picked up that that is not what it was supposed to be. And the reason they didn't is because nobody conveyed it on to them like that. So if you're not corrected, you see it in a film, you think that's the way it's supposed to be done. And it's not.
Let's go back to your personal training, Sensei. At some point, you were going to open up a school on Kadena Air Force Base. Mm-hmm. Now, you couldn't do this on your own.
Right.
And there are some people that are saying that they had schools in some of the armed bases, whether it be Army, Marine, or Air Force.
Right.
Let's just discuss how the Kadena Air Force Karate Dojo began.
Mm-hmm. All right, the Kadena Air Base Karate Dojo. Now, try to envision it. We've been going to Koza City Dojo. Correction, it wasn't Koza City. Kadena is called Koza City today. It was called Old Koza. That is where Sensei Kesey's dojo was. And by the way, this was a very rough neighborhood. This is not a place that you wanted to be in after dark. In fact, when I first started taking karate, Sensei Kesey would have some of the students meet me at the bus stop, escort me to the dojo, and after classes, escort me back to the bus stop to keep from getting me beat up or what have you. Now they did that until I acquired a certain amount of fighting skill, and plus the natives and then everybody else around recognized me and knew what I was doing there. But the Kadena Air Base, now we had probably 5 or 6 Americans going from Kadena to Old Koza class. Well, we talked about it. William Spicer was one of the friends, and he was a sergeant. Also, that I believe he was a plumber. We worked in the engineering group, so you had the electricians and the plumbers and et cetera, and et cetera, and et cetera right around. So we saw each other quite a bit. And he was taking the karate, so he says, let's try to form a karate club on base, on Kadena. So we went to the major and the first sergeant and the captain, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, it turns out that yes, we got the use of the Zemke Gym and the Schilling Community Center to start and form a karate school on the base itself. So in 1960, I guess mid-60, late 60, something like that, the Kadena Air Force Base Karate Dojo was formed, and as far as I know, it's still in existence today.
Well, the reason I wanted to ask you that question, Sensei, is because we do want to establish a date for the beginning of the club.
Right.
At that point, who were the teachers and basically how many students were there?
Okay, of course, like any karate studio, it always starts out with a few people. And of course, the few people were the ones that went to Old Koza Dojo. You know, instead of going to Old Koza, we now went to Kadena. All right. Some of us, myself, went to both. You know, we attended both. However, the dojo started off with maybe a half a dozen people, something like that. And as far as the teacher goes, there was never any question as to who the teacher was. The teacher was always Sensei Kesey. I was the American high rank, therefore I was the American teacher. And when it came down to somebody coming into class and saying, whose class is this, who is the teacher, we always went, Sensei Kesey is the teacher. If Sensei Kesey did not show up or was not there, I was the teacher. Now, Sensei Soken would frequent the Kadena classes from about 61 on to 64, something like that. Was he there every day? No. Was he there every class? No. Was he there once or twice a week? Yes. okay, depending on what the schedule was. He did not formally teach the classes. He would come out, sit, watch the classes, get up, demonstrate a kata, correct a few people, and such and so forth. The class built to about 67 people. During the class, we fought every day. We did kumite, which is fighting. We did korte, which is arm conditioning, leg conditioning, body conditioning, every day. Every day you did drills. Every day you did technique. Every day you did kata. Every day you did weapons. Every day you did conditioning, and every day you did fighting. That was a 7-day-a-week process. And it went on. And of course, the classes were worked out. When it rained, we were on a tiled concrete floor. When it didn't rain, we were on a cement patio. And that's where we worked out.
Now, Sensei, let's just talk a little bit about what happened once you got proficient. You then went to Japan and fought in Japan as part of an Okinawan team.
In 1962, I and a gentleman called William Spicer. William Spicer was a brown belt at that time, I believe. And William Spicer was a gentleman that I was very close friends with. We spent a lot of time together, and he was a linguistic specialist. He could read, write, sing, and dance Okinawan, Hogan, and Japanese. I mean, literally any and every word. Well, I was chosen, along with William Spicer, was chosen in 1962 to represent Okinawa in the All Japan Karate tournaments. Sensei Kesey, myself, and William Spicer went to Japan, and we fought. We fought in the Japanese Special Forces team. We fought and beat them. We toured Japan for a while and such and so forth. We had a great time. There's some photographs which you'll see on that also.
Now, Sensei, once you returned to Okinawa from Japan, approximately what was your rank, and now what was your position with Sensei Kesey?
Here again, my position with Sensei Kesey was exactly the same. I was still his showpiece. I was his top guy. If you wanted to use a word of protege, you could say I was his protege. Literally, I did everything that Kesey did. I mean, if he sneezed, I would do my utmost to sneeze exactly in the same mannerisms. There was a tremendous amount of hostility on Okinawa during that time period. It was consistent fights. If you wanted to get in a fight, all you had to do is go from bar to bar, and you would definitely get into a fight. There was no ifs, ands, and buts about it. They had fighting teams there. They had people design and put together methods in which to purposely hurt people. Numerous times I had been sitting in a bar, and Sensei Kesey would teach you where to sit, how to accept a drink, how to pass a drink, how to light a cigarette, how to go to the bathroom, how to kneel, how to sleep, everything in a karate fashion, so it would cut down or eliminate totally you getting hit. But getting back to the point, I've seen GIs come in, reach in between two people at the bar, order a beer, drink the beer, and hit the person right in the side of the face with the bottle of beer itself. I've seen them come in, order a mixed drink, drink the drink down, turn the cup down, hold it in the bottom of the hand, look at the guy, and push it right in his face. I mean, that was a very common thing. It was a very common thing. There was a tremendous amount of hostility.
I want to take you back to Sensei Kesey and Sensei Sokka at this time. Now, you've been with them now a year and a half, 2 years. You've seen them train together, around each other. Many times it's been noted that Sensei Kesey was Sensei Sokka's protege.
Absolutely.
Much like you spoke of yourself as being Sensei Kesey's protege. Do you think that was the case, and do you think that these two men were very good martial artists, worked very hard together, but also had more of a bond than just karate?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Sensei Kesey, like I had mentioned before, was a very aggressive fighter. He had a reputation. He was extremely well known. When we would go to the various shiais and competitions and such and so forth, when I would win or whatever, they would go over and congratulate Sensei Kesey. They wouldn't congratulate you. You were a product of your teacher. Sensei Kesey and Soken became very frequent with each other, as far as Kesey would miss classes because he was over Soken's training by himself. I would be leading the classes or teaching the classes. They were constantly together on a weekly base to a bi-weekly base that I know of, to a bi-monthly base, a couple of times a month, that sort of thing. I know even when I came back to the States in '64, through correspondence continuously, Sensei Kesey would mention Sensei Soken as to we're building a new house for him, you know, we're doing this for him, we did this, we did that, on a continuous basis. Everything you read about, anytime you read anything about Sensei Soken and Kesey being mentioned, Kesey was always the number one. Kesey was mentioned as a protege continuously. Now, did Soken have other karate students? Absolutely. Did he have other great karate people on the island? Absolutely. Teacher? He was a teacher of teachers. It is that simple. Sensei Soken was just an incredible man. He did not and would not accept anybody as a student. He was very selective in who he took on as a student. And as far as I'm concerned, Sensei Kesey was, in fact, his protege and learned probably as much of the system or more of the system than any person alive today. And, you know, there's so many things that go on. I hear all these people say, oh, well, you know, I was on Okinawa for 18 months or 2 years and I got the whole system. I got all the katas, I got all the knowledge, I got all this, I got all that. I find that exceptionally hard to believe. And the reason I say that is because Sensei Kesey told me flat outright, I would only get 75 to 80% of the system no matter how good I got, no matter how much of a winner I was, and no matter how many people I beat. I was only going to get 75 to 80%. And why was that? Because I was not Okinawan. If you were not Okinawan, you could not get 100%. Now, let's go on to one other statement that I want to make. Sensei Soken's highest technique was the Hakusuru kata, the white cream. I was never privileged enough to even see the kata in its entirety. I was only allowed to see bits and pieces of it. Never have I seen the kata in its entirety. And I would never expect to, because it was the highest technique in the system. You had a time limit. You had a rank achievement. You had a knowledge per rank. There was no such thing as, okay, you're in the system, now I'm going to teach you everything in the system. That is a flat, outright exaggeration. I cannot believe that any American has ever learned the entire system. It's just impossible. More or less the Hakusuru kata. Now there's people out there that say that they know the Hakusuru kata, but I will never buy it. I will never believe that Sensei Soken would take somebody that they did not know, that has not worked for them for tens of years, and all of a sudden give them everything or give them the highest secrets in the system. It's just not possible.
Well, Sensei, you hit on a lot of things, and you brought into play a couple of comments that we were going to try to get to a little bit later on, but that's okay. What I'd like to do, though, is I'd like to just, at this point, it's almost time for you to leave. And what we'd like to point out now is you've been with Sensei Kesey for a full 4 years at this point. You have been with Sensei Soken for over a couple of years, two and a half years. Mm-hmm. And it's just about that time for you to leave.
Right.
What takes place at that point?
Well, normally when a person wants to rotate back to the States or rotate to another assignment or whatever, there was always a going away party. All right, I have photographs of some of our promotional parties, some of the people being honored, some of the going away parties and stuff like that. Towards the end, when a person is getting to rotate back, if he was close to his next rank, he was tested for his rank. If he wasn't, he was merely given a party. And everybody had a good time, and the person would rotate back to the States, hopefully to form a dojo and to continue the spread of the system. That's basically what it was.
Well, what I'd like to establish at this point, one, what was your rank at that point?
When I rotated back, I was a fourth, I believe.
And it was issued by which association?
It was issued by the All Japan Karate Do League. There were Sokka did not personally give out certificates until towards the end of my reign. I don't think I can't remember ever seeing a certificate from him up to that point. I did not personally get any certificates from him at that point, not at all. The All Japan Karate Do League was the affiliation in which anybody and everybody that was in karate at that time period was associated with. There were not a magnitude of organizations. There was only this one, and therefore all certificates came through that. Now, Sensei Kesey, you would see some of the certificates I have Nakamura, Shimabuku, Mashiro, Shiakawa, Kesey, all names and stamps on them. Some of them would be Nakamura, Shimabuku, and Sensei Kesey. Some of them would be Mashiro and Kesey. You know, it was like that. But Sensei Sokka never gave me a certificate at that point.
Now, we must also mention that Sensei Kesey really did not begin to teach the Matsumoto system until later in the 60s, 3 or 4 years after you left the island.
That is correct.
And so therefore, really, in all honesty, we wouldn't have expected you to have a certificate at that point with anything else but the main association.
That is true.
So what I'd like to do now is just take you to your next station. You come back to the States, where are you located and what are you doing?
Okay, I'm stationed at Fort Bragg, Pope Air Force Base. All right, that was my last year for my 5.5 years in the service. We got extended during the Cuban crisis. Sensei Kesey, that's very true. I came back to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Fayetteville, North Carolina, Pope Air Force Base, and I established a small karate studio there. That was my first independent studio away from Sensei Kesey. Sensei Kesey and I were corresponding off and on, back and forth, etc. and etc. After that, I got out of the service, went to Washington, D.C., formed studios there. I lost my first 3 studios in Washington, D.C. due to the fact that we were just too hard. The students just did not want to pay, get beat on, train 6 and 7 days a week. Overly ranks, you know, the first rank was 18 months. It was just incredible. It was just incredible. I had to each time lessen the strength and the quality of the karate in which I was teaching, the intensity, to be able to hold students. I can remember paying $120 a month out of my own pocket just to pay the rent, just to teach, because the student enrollment was not there. We had lots of students come in, lots of people come in, but they just wouldn't stay. They just wouldn't stay. Sensei Kesey changed from teaching well, let's say that he was teaching Okinawan Shorin-ryu, all right, Shorin system branch, predominantly. However, the Matsumoto was continuously being injected into it. And the training was a mixture of both.
Okay, Sensei, the year is 1964. You have just left Okinawa. What happened to you when you returned to the States?
All right, my next assignment was Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Fayetteville, Pope Air Force Base, which I formed a small karate studio. Once again, in the electric shop. We use the electric shop as a studio. Training from there, we went, after I got out of the service in '64, we went to Washington, D.C., which was where I was born, and I established 3 different schools there. Each one of those schools failed because the karate was too hard, the training was too aggressive, and I couldn't find students that would put up with that type of training, because I was trying to train them the same way that I was trained on Okinawa. So the schools failed. Each time I reduced the intensity and training methods to establish a school that would finally continue on and on and on.
Okay, so let's just jump a little bit ahead. The year is, let's say, the late 1960s. During your training in these different dojos throughout the Washington area, did you ever encounter or come across other Okinawan trained individuals from, say, Sensei Kesey or other schools on Okinawa?
Oh yeah, I ran across a colleague that I had trained with overseas and fought against overseas. Gary Saluter was Nakamura's head American student. He was from Marine. He and I formed a school together. He eventually started training under me, and we established our next school.
How about people coming back from Okinawa? Were you hearing anything about the style of karate that was being taught there?
Oh yeah, in contact with various people coming back from Okinawa, and of course anybody that you ran across with that had any Okinawan background at all through the various tournaments and such and so forth. You always stopped and talked and became friends and everything else. Karate was starting to change drastically at that point. It was getting less and less traditional. It was getting more and more commercial.
How about Sensei Kesey? What were you hearing about the style of karate that he was teaching on Okinawa at that time?
Well, from what everything was told to me, plus the correspondence with Kesey, Kesey changed completely from the old hard Shorin-ryu method with the mixture or influx of Matsumoto Sato over to the Matsumoto Shorin-ryu style completely. At that point, I think it was 1966.
Let's jump ahead a little bit. At what time were you, Grandmaster Sokka, and Sensei Kesey reunited here in the States?
1972 was Sensei Sokka's first and only trip to the United States. Came to Philadelphia. I was contacted. I went to see Sensei Kesey and Sokka. In fact, I entered the tournament that Glenn Primmer would put on to show Sensei Kesey and Sokka Sensei that I was still active, still training hard, and still teaching the same methods. We reunited our friendships, everything like that. In fact, they asked me to move into their hotel room. Sensei Sokka was supposed to stay a month. He stayed a little over a week, got sick, and had to return back to Okinawa. During that time period, he asked me to hit up the association in partnership with Glenn Primmer. At that time, it was going to be the OKF, Okinawan Karate Federation. After the Okinawan Karate Federation failed for reasons that we won't get into right now, 1975, SMOKA was born. Shorin-ryu Matsumoto Orthodox Karate Association. Sensei Sokka and Kesey asked me to head up this association, being that I was the highest rank in the Matsumoto Sato system at that time, the most well-known and the most proficient in the system. Sensei Kesey literally had hundreds of black belts and names of and addresses of such which we contacted to let everybody know that we were changing from the OKF into the SMOKA association. During that time, Sensei Sokka and Sensei Kesey stated that you only have certificates from under Sokka Sensei with his name on them from, I believe, 5th or 6th degree up. And he said it was befitting that we give you the full line of certificates, being such that through 60 to 64, Sokka was not giving out certificates with his name on them, that we go back and give you matching certificates of first up to the present rank of 6, I believe it was at that time. So Sensei Kesey and Sensei Sokka issued me Shodan, Nidan, Sandan, Yondan, etc. Certificates in the matching under Sensei Sokka's seals.
And of course this took place in the early 70s, and what they did at that point was go back, establish you as the first American student. Also, he issued certificates that at that time were only issued by the All Japanese Association,
yes,
which you have certificates at that point. And now you were to head up a new association called SMOKA.
Yes, that was also to establish that I was the highest rank and most proficient student at that time. Your light's flashing.
That's fine. We got 5 minutes. Okay, so Sensei, at this point, what I want to do is I just want to go over this point one more time. You are now going to head up an association called Smoker.
That is correct.
The supreme master, supreme instructor at this point is
Sokka.
And his protege or his senior student is
Sensei Kesey.
And his American representative is
James Coffman.
And that is the lineage, that is the line. And what are you supposed to be teaching at this point in time?
Okay, at this time I was to be teaching a combination of Shorin-ryu for the old people that studied during my time period, and in between that and the transition of the Matsumoto, plus teach 100% of the Matsumoto to them also. That way we covered all the bases. I was the only one in the United States that could do both, in fact. Many of the people came back. We had dozens and dozens and dozens of people come to my studio for training, and etc. and etc.
Very quickly, I'd like you to go over the reason why around the 1978 time period you and Sensei Kesey had a splitting of the ways.
Yes, Sensei Kesey and I parted in 1978, I believe it was. Sensei Kesey is still very dear to me. He will always be my teacher. I remember the old Sensei Kesey, an extremely aggressive, wonderful, talented karate instructor. We parted because Sensei Kesey wanted me to issue certificates to people that I felt were unqualified, and therefore I did not want my name on a certificate authorizing them as the Okinawan representative here in the States. So because of that, Sensei Kesey and I parted. After that, there was another person that took my place, and that was really the birth of Smoka USA. And I believe after that it changed from Smoka to Kenshin-kan Karate Association.
Now, Kenshin-kan being Sensei Kesey's organization. Smoker USA is still alive and well today.
Still alive and well, and we still teach the same way, in same manner, same kata, same everything that I was taught in 1960 on.
So we're going to take just a minute here. We're going to review very quickly. You started your training in 1960 with Sensei Kesey.
That is correct.
About 1961
with Sensei Sokka.
With Sensei Sokka. In 1964, you left the island and were not involved with all the changes, politics, and things that took place at that point.
No.
Re-established your acquaintance back in 1972 when Sensei Sokka and Sensei Kesey came here as representatives of their style in 1972. At that point, you were asked to form, along with Glenn Premu, OKF, which at that point, for whatever reason, did not fly.
Right.
A couple of years later, 1975, you were again approached by Sensei Sokka and Sensei Kesey. With them in hand and yourself here as the American representative, you formed an association called Smoker.
That is correct, Smoker.
And then in 1978, when you parted ways with Sensei Kesey over an issue on ranking, you then formed or continued to form the Smoker Association, but added USA to it.
That is correct.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so what we want to do and we want to establish in the next minute or two is the fact that, other than the fact that you are no longer training with Sensei Kesey, and that have been since 1978,
Right.
the style and the system that you're teaching is true to the way that you learned in 1960 through 1978.
That is correct.
And that all your ranks are official and duly noted, and that even though you were promoted in 1977 to 7th Dan Black Belt with certificates from Sensei Kesey and Sensei Sokka as the head of the Smoker Association, you have not entertained nor have you ever promoted or been promoted above that rank of 7th Dan Black.
That is correct. I have never, and probably never will. I'm probably destined to be a 7th degree for the rest of my life.
Okay, Sensei, at this point in time, we're going to stop this interview. I want to thank you very much for what you've done here today. Hopefully it's cleared up a lot of questions that people have. and that we will actually have a second and concluding part to this interview, which will take us from 1978 to today.
Wonderful. Thank you.